First, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for attending the Vracus Blum Computer Consulting monthly webinar series, today featuring Sage Data and Analytics. My name is Kelly Bergman, and I have the pleasure of introducing you to Trey Johnson. Trey is the Chief Evangelist and America's Business Leader for Zap. Having spent half of his 26-year career at Zap, Trey is proud of the growth their flagship product, Zap Data Hub, has had with Sage as Sage Data and Analytics. So there's your connection. Now, as Zap is delivering an edition of this product as Sage Data and Analytics for the Sage 300, Sage 100, and Sage X3 customer base, data and analytics on the Sage ERP has never been a bigger passion for Trey. When not talking about data and analytics, you can often find him wrenching on a classic Porsche automobile restoration. Little jealous there, Trey, but I digress. Yeah. I think maybe you should take it from here.
Yeah, I know it sounds very good, Kelly. Thank you so much to Vracus Blum for the opportunity today to talk with you a bit about Sage Data and Analytics. And certainly is our sincere hope that now that we've been in the Sage 100 and Sage 300 community, probably for the better part of 7 months, 8 months at this point, that many of you have probably seen Sage Data and Analytics before. So we're going to take a little bit of a different slant today and talk a little bit more about the things that we do that support the automation of financial reporting. Now, with that said, a picture is probably incredibly helpful at this point. So I'll just move forward in the slides. And for those of you that maybe are not familiar with Sage Data and Analytics, there's a lot that we can really kind of cover pretty quickly within the context of this graphic that you see here. So Zap being the deliverers of Zap Data Hub, which is also known as Sage Data and Analytics, basically allows for Sage Data and Analytics to connect directly to your Sage ERP in a very intelligent fashion, extract the data that is needed from it, but also allows for the connectivity to a variety of additional data sources. And why that is particularly important, even in or especially in financial type reporting scenarios, is what we have seen, particularly through the pandemic. A lot of organizations have had some scenarios where the landscape for their business has changed. They've had some acquisitions or other mergers that have actually brought other types of financially oriented data sources online for their business. Well, what we can do with Sage Data and Analytics is not only connect to the Sage ERP as your primary data source, but we can also connect to those other financial data sources, bring that information together within the cloud-based environment that is Sage Data and Analytics, and provide the platform upon which you can deliver a full range of analytical content. And that's part of what today's focus is the financially oriented analytical content that we can share. So as we go, I'd highly encourage that anyone that might have questions, feel free to kind of queue them up through the Q&A or chat interface, and we'll be sure to get to those at the end. So when we talk about financial reporting, and specifically as it relates to Sage Data and Analytics, there's a lot of kind of core capabilities around it, and a lot of these are spelled out both on the words on the left-hand side and the graphical elements that are in the right-hand side of the slide. And I'll probably just touch on a few of them. And so for starters, we are very much delivering with Sage Data and Analytics out of the box analytical content that is dashboards to support the CFO, AR, AP. We'll run through examples of many of those. Because we're resident in the cloud, that means that there's really not any infrastructure that your business really needs to take on or build to support this. With all of the different metrics that underlie our analytics, those metrics become the building blocks for all of the things that you might choose to do. And again, we provide our own capabilities in terms of some interactive dashboards and some various financial statements that we'll run through a few different formats. But this really becomes a powerful experience for you as an end user organization. And we're incredibly blessed that we've had such a great experience to this point, with a number of the different Vracus Blum customers, and really delivering some great outcomes for them quite quickly. There's some other elements that are here that I'll cover off as we go through, but as you're looking across, the balance of the list, I imagine if you're wearing a CFO or a financial leader hat, these are probably some things that you've wanted to do. I will draw your attention to the currency conversion. We can very much do currency conversion for those customers that have an external solution requirement around Sage 100. Or Sage 300 solution natively delivers that. So if you see any further mention of currency conversion, it's probably related to the capabilities that come with our Sage 300 offering. But with that said, there are a number of different pieces of analytical content. If you're seeing this for the first time, there's a lot to really probably, consume here. We have the capabilities of delivering dashboards for the most senior of decision makers in the finance function, all the way through to people that are very targeted and focused on certain financial aspects of the business, such as receivables, such as payables. But again, we'll touch on all of these more in terms of a live demo. But what we've really endeavored to do, and why we spend a good amount of time in that initial implementation with the partner and yourselves as end customers, is because we want to make sure that the data maps incredibly well into these assets and allows for you to actually have a really great starting point to be able to then better understand what's going on within your business, but more so as your individual users come across some scenarios of things that they would prefer to do. Well, it's much easier to say what you'd like to see change with some out-of-the-box analytical content than it is to point to a blank piece of paper and try and draw up what it is that you want to see. Now, again, there's a lot of things that we naturally enable in terms of the exploration and the experience here. It's a dramatically different experience than just simply doing things within Excel. And I imagine that some of you are very Excel focused and Excel oriented. Not that that's a bad thing at all, but as it comes time to really look across the business, look at potentially other sources of data, that whole consolidated Excel experience becomes a bit more challenging. So I'm excited to, as we move towards the demos here in just probably a few more slides, there's a real capability around this for you. So as I mentioned, there's a collection of metrics that really drive everything that we do. Now, we have metrics for more than just the financials. So we have support for not only financial, but sales, purchasing, inventory management. All of those have some underlying metrics and calculations within them. What you'll notice in this particular view on the right-hand side is we have some great metrics that drive things like the debt ratio, financial leverage, cash, quick ratios, working capital, the days inventory and payables outstanding, as well as the days sales outstanding. So you really have all of these pieces that serve as fundamental building blocks that you'll see in the demo are repeated across various different analytical assets, similar to what you see on the screen here, where we have at the top, we have the performance, the activity, and the profitability metrics kind of standing on their own. But then what you'll also see is you'll see net sales propagates through to a couple of charts, the days sales and the days inventory and the days payables outstanding. There are their own building blocks on the lower right-hand side of the chart. There's a lot of those capabilities. And again, we'll kind of give you the full experience of this in just a few moments on the demo as well. And one of the big things that we have been asked repeatedly as we've built up a lot of successful customers around Sage Data and Analytics, specifically for Sage 100 and for Sage 300, is where can we go with the financial statements? So we deliver a number of out-of-the-box pieces of analytical content, some of which are financial statements. And so these financial statements tend to take the form of elements like you see on the screen, or in these cases, these are some further expansions such as the consolidated P&L, a statement of cash flows, the P&L with some movement information across the months, and then the P&L budgetary type of analysis to support the very basic elements that come into your forecasting cycles. And so all of those are certainly essential elements, and they're complemented by other elements such as the balance sheet, trial balances, other elements in that regard. And a question that we often get is, well, we're already doing aspects of financial reporting. Why would we look to use this tool set versus what we do? A couple of things. Firstly, Sage Data and Analytics because of the nature of the way the product works, we're extracting the data from the ERP and we're loading it into the cloud environment. What that ultimately means is as you continue to do an additional set of analytics or drill and further explore, you're not putting any burden or load on the ERP itself to continue answering those questions because it's its own separate environment that's answering the questions that you pose to it. Secondarily, there's a real strong opportunity to be, with the nature of the way Sage Data Analytics works, refresh the data much more frequently for sub areas like finance. So while it's not entirely real time, it's very timely. And it can be delivered in a fashion that really suits the refresh intervals that you would need for the purposes of reporting. The last of which, and you probably have to hear it more directly from an end user that has gone from maybe some of the reporting tools that they've used in the past to Sage Data and Analytics. People just naturally like the capability of being able to pull this up within the browser, to socialize it with others. And that's part of what we'll go to in a moment. It's just talking about all the different ways that others can kind of consume this information. Nothing against Excel, but it becomes inherently problematic if you're pulling things either through a report into Excel or just into Excel directly and doing work, because the versioning of the information tends to get a little bit out of date and out of sync, and people aren't always quite sure that they're looking at the most proper set of information. That is not a concern with Sage Data and Analytics, because what we're doing is we're very much making sure that you're always getting the most current view of what's going on within the ERP or the ERP and the other sources of data. And that's particularly important when we come to things like exploration, because what you really want to be able to do is obviously look across periods of time, as some of the graphics indicate, but you also need the ability to kind of navigate and explore, being able to filter against, companies, being able to drill up and down on the chart of accounts and within the hierarchies. Those are the elements that naturally need to be supported, provide very quick answers, give your decision makers that opportunity to determine if that exploration is meaningful or not. And at the very fundamental part of it is, and I'll show this again in the demo, is that ability to kind of get to that lowest level information where you don't necessarily want to start at the GL transactions, but you may want to finish there and understand exactly what happened in a given period of time for a given account or set of accounts. That ability to drill through and get to those underlying details, because we preserve all of that detailed information in the cloud environment, is an important one as well. Now, for some of your organizations, the ability to look across companies becomes a bit more important. That is a key facet of what we can do and we can support. So you can look at companies side by side. You can also support consolidations. Now, we're not going to do the intercompany eliminations, between your companies, but what we are going to do is we're very much going to read those transactions just like all other data that we can consume from the ERP and present it in a very much a fashion that allows for you to look at companies side by side, which we'll show an example or two of, as well as be able to see it particularly rolled up. For those of you that are familiar with or have scenarios where you possibly are supporting your own multi-currency sort of things, we'll talk about that in a moment as well. So for a moment as well. So the currency conversion, while this is kind of baked in, if you will, for Sage 300 as a product, if you are doing multi-currency on Sage 100 in your own kind of unique ways, there is an ability for us to kind of support those scenarios. Or if you happen to have data that's coming from another system that's in a different currency, you do have that ability to still leverage our inbuilt currency conversion, meaning that you're able to naturally look at all relevant currencies rolled up into a single functional reporting currency. What we also have the ability to do is introduce all of the gap requirements as it relates to currency translation, and some of those adjustment things. So I know that's not particularly domain for a lot of the Sage 100 users, but if people are in that situation where they've maybe got some data coming from somewhere else in a different currency, know that we can support you in that regard. One thing that I'm absolutely sure of when we talk about the way that our product works is while there may be a strong desire for things to run all within a single fiscal calendar at the time that an organization maybe is merging, there may be some periods that you have to look back upon. We can support multiple fiscal calendars, within the solution. And it's not something that we've necessarily had to promote a lot, but it is something that is practically found on occasion. But what is most important about this is the fact that not only do we support multiple fiscal calendars, but we just simply support multiple calendar orientations. So for example, not only is there the traditional date that's providing, January as the first month of the calendar year, but it may very well be that January represents the fourth or the seventh month of your fiscal year. And so that ability to actually look at it in both those ways is incredibly important. In this scenario, what we're really kind of talking about here specifically is if you do want to be able to kind of analyze what happened in the fourth month for both companies that are on different fiscal calendars, we can support that, and happy to talk about that in a little bit more depth if it's a question later on. So one of the last pieces that I did want to cover off that, again, we just wanted to give it the proper amount of time here on the slides before we dive straight into the demo. It's just the concept of report packs. And so report packs, one of the things that we have heard is that generally speaking, amongst you as customers, there is some person in your organization that has the unofficial title of report hander outer. That person is, the one that is making sure everything is kind of presented in the right way to, maybe it's your executive or management team. Maybe you have some reporting requirements that you want to share information with external stakeholders, maybe that have an equity stake in the business, or simply it's a parent company that you need to report up to. Or in many of the cases that we're starting to really uncover, you have a need to just share information through your business-to-business relationships with suppliers or those vendors that you otherwise work with. That's where report packs come into play so strong. And so we'll show an example of this more live, but just know that the audience for the analytical content doesn't stop with those that can fire up their browser, point to the cloud instance and interact with the solution, but rather you can have an extended audience that is very much a free audience for this product, where you can actually deliver information out to them in multi-page PDF documents, which I'll share a great example of with you. They can be distributed in an automated fashion, so you can send it out on a weekly basis, or it can be distributed in response to some data event. So you may be monitoring cash on hand, or you may be monitoring day sales outstanding and say, hey, when we cross this particular threshold, I want this group of users to be notified, alerted, provided the information that they need to make some decisions. And it may be that you send them a report pack, or it may be that you send them an attachment plus a link back to the report so that they can do their own exploratory type analysis. And so all of these things are just naturally part of that really enhanced financial reporting that we really think needs to be automated, brought to the business, shared with a broader audience that maybe you're able to do today with some of the traditional tools that you have. And so with all of those things being said, I think that the best thing that we can do at this point is take a bit of a closer look. And so to do that, I'm going to simply go find my browser window here, and I'll drag it onto the screen and be in a position to kind of talk through it. So for those of you that have not ever seen Sage Data and Analytics live and within the browser, well, here it is. So I'll probably start here just to make sure that everybody's reasonably oriented. So we talked a little bit in the slides about the financially oriented set of dashboards that we had, 70 plus metrics that were those calculations that drive everything that we do, whether it be some of the net sales or the working capital or other elements. And you'll notice again that that information tends to repeat, so net sales, operating profit, days sales outstanding, days payable, days inventory outstanding, cash to cash. All of these things that you would naturally want to calculate are being calculated in the system and then able to be reused across the analytical content. Now, if this was just a pretty picture, that wouldn't be particularly great. And so what we do is we have the ability for people to, again, ask additional questions and get additional answers. So in this case, I've actually chosen to change one of the filters at the top of the screen. And you notice that all of the data across this changed fairly quickly. That is a real byproduct of this running within the cloud in an optimized reporting environment. So you don't have any tools that are going off and actively requerying the ERP every time that you ask a question. Those are incredibly detrimental to your operations. And through our experience working with a number of Sage 100 customers, many of you are really, fully leveraging the ERP for the transactions that occur throughout the business day. So the thought of pointing a tool at it and saying, hey, go, ask for a lot of information while people are trying to record transactions on the system becomes incredibly problematic. We remove that problem entirely. What we also do is we give people that opportunity to naturally explore. So if I wanted to see what was going on with this particular spike, well, I can double click and that drills me down and takes me to, a level of information, a level of detail. I can also right click, and there's a few things that I can do here. I could create a detailed report, which I'll share in just a moment. Or I can link over to other related items. And since we are very much financially oriented in today's session, let's go ahead and open a related income statement. And apologies, I chose a month that probably didn't have the most data for us to look at, but still, what you'll notice is we have that traditional formatting from a financial statements, P&L summary in this particular case that's being shown here. But what we also have is we also have some related analytical content. And what's really the most important is when you do see a number that you're particularly interested in, as I was going to show just a moment ago, we can create what is called a detailed report. Now, because I chose to create detailed report, and that was very much an automatic sort of thing that has occurred, there was no preset format for the information. So we went out and we grabbed all of the related columns to the numbers we were looking at. In the real world, you would likely want to have a pre-established format for this detailed report that did away with some of these columns that don't necessarily have information in them. You'll notice we say unknown if something is missing, so you're not led to miss blank data or things of that nature. But what we also have done here is we've quite literally grabbed all of the records that made up that underlying transaction. Now in the real world, these 15 to 20 records, if you went and drilled through on your GL, for some businesses might be 15 or 20 pages of data. So in those cases, you would potentially want to export that information out to Excel and do some offline analysis, some offline searching for that needle in the haystack or whatever might be the case. Excel is incredibly good, for that type of capability. Obviously, our slant is that Excel is not as good for the socialization of information, sharing with others. And quite candidly, if people are in the details like the GL, it has to be a fairly exceptional situation that would cause them to want to go look at the individual transactions. But know that you have that transparency from the highest level dashboards that we started with all the way through to the lowest level information. And that is consistent across all of the reporting that we do. So because I'm in the browser, I can simply just kind of click the back button here a couple of times. I will show a couple of other related pieces of analytical content, and then we'll get into some of the other available financial statements. We'll look at them much more closely. But as a starting point, let me actually drill this back up. And what you'll notice is that there are other areas here, AR and AP, and we talked about that we have special focuses for those different receivables focused people or payables focused individuals. In this case, I can open the AR dashboard. And apparently we've got some French that's bled through into this, which is very interesting. But what you'll notice is that there's a full range again of those building blocks for the day sales outstanding, the average days delinquent, sales and total AR as some numbers that you might use elsewhere in the system. And then obviously, kind of a configuration of data as well. And so all of those things are just naturally there for people to serve as a starting point. And again, this is what you get with the standard implementation of Sage Data and Analytics. So these pieces come out of the box. We work with you through your partner to get your chart of accounts mapped into some of the categories. We obviously know what sales are, we know what expense is, we know what other possible revenue elements are for the purposes of reporting, but then that drives and supports driving all the other things that you might want to do in terms of analytical exploration. And so what I'll do is I'll actually just switch over my browser tab here. And I'm going to come over to one of the folders. So what I've done, and I apologize, I did this a bit quickly. This is the consumer experience. So this is kind of the way that users would typically interact. What I did in changing browser tabs, and I know it took on a slightly different look and feel as I came into the designer environment. There are two types of users that come with the different plans that are available. There are designers, which is more of a limited number, and consumers, which is in a larger number. Consumers would typically be the majority of your end users, whereas designers are roughly about 10%. But the designers would use this environment to build things for themselves and others, to change the out-of-the-box pieces of content as well. And so in this particular case, I've got a few different elements that we had kind of highlighted, various different reports that we can kind of look through and explore. And I'll open a couple of these. Let's do the consolidated balance sheet as an example by company. And I'll actually go off and see if I can grab a different period of time. December 2020, maybe not so much, maybe December 2021. So that's probably giving us, the information that we need. But what you'll notice, and this being the designer view, these drop-down filters are just a little bit different, but you'll notice that we're preserving the exploration experience here. So I can very quickly expand my traditional financial statement, or the balance sheet in this case, and I can look across what is going on in the accounts or sub accounts. And so in this particular view, we're probably only going to go down a couple of levels for that as well. You'll notice this particular example also is bringing through some of the currency translation elements. Being a demo, it's probably mutually applicable to Sage 100 and 300. But you'll note that there is an ability to look at a couple of companies side by side here to look at the total consolidated value. If I bring on this other company, I don't know that it's going to actually have any data yet. It doesn't, but you'll notice that it does show that additional company in the column. So this becomes a really powerful platform for if you're using, if you have multiple companies that are all conforming to, kind of the same chart of accounts, or minimally roll into the way that we would structure the data, then you can look at these overarching inventory values, fixed assets, accounts payable, and the like across all of those companies. I will actually kind of turn that item off just so it's a little easier to look at. You also notice that there's other ways that we can filter that are basically contextual based on what we select. So if I deselect all items, I want to focus on wholesale, which is probably not the best. We'll choose commercial, maybe not. And we'll just choose all of them again. So there are abilities to kind of do some additional filtering. But if I come back to this folder structure here, again, as a designer, I can kind of explore what we also have available. I'm actually going to open up the cash flow forecast. I do need to change this to a different period of time. So we'll again try December 2019. That's pretty good. And what you'll notice is, again, we have these different elements that are here. To kind of take this in a slightly different direction than maybe I originally intended, I'll actually turn on the editing function, which is this little pencil icon. I expand this. I can actually choose to do a number of different things with this. I'm actually going to work with this, this particular view. I have listed all of the financially related elements that are here. And so what I can do is I can choose to bring other elements, on to the surface, if you will. We really have got the vast majority. I'll just drag one thing up. I'm just going to drag this segment 10 up to the slicers, just so that you have a sense of how easy it is to kind of edit and add on, to the reports. Furthermore, we have some different columns like the year to date, the full year forecast. Happy to go through those in just a moment when I actually build a report for everybody. But there's a few more examples that we can explore. I would highly encourage you, if you want to really look at all of these examples in detail, we'll have the availability of an ebook, as well as the natural availability to work with Brackus Bloom on setting up maybe a subsequent review. But let's just open a trial balance with some of the monthly movement information. You notice that this gives us that view that one would expect to be able to get from a trial balance, plus the ability to look at the movement type data. You will notice that we do have these the expansion capabilities. I don't know that it particularly makes sense on the trial balance, because I don't think that I want to look at this across days, but just know that you can set this up in such a way that you could have quarterly movements, that you could expand to months, and so on and so forth. And so it really turns on just a different level of analytical capability than maybe you have today with your current financial reporting. So with all of those things said, just being conscious of time, there's only two more things that I would really prefer to do here. One of them is I would really prefer to just simply go in and build out a report. The other is I do want to show you a report pack. I'm actually going to show it from this browser tab real quick. Go to report packs, financial report pack. So what a report pack allows us to do is a report pack allows us to take and basically create some aesthetic elements like a cover page, like a closing maybe page to the document, and then we can basically go shopping and the other analytic content that we have. So for example, I may have a sales dashboard that I want to include on this. Well, I can drag this on. I can then position this within the document, and all of a sudden that becomes part of what I'm going to deliver out to the users to see and to interact with. It's really intended to be that straightforward and that easy. What we do have the ability to do is not only build charts and tables and dashboards and other kind of related reporting elements, but we also have the ability to incorporate rich text type documents and narratives, and really integrate other sources externally, like web pages and the like. So there's quite a bit that you can do through this more functionality in terms of other elements that can be introduced. But as you build them and users use them in an interactive way, you may find yourself with a group of users that aren't really in that licensed group of consumer or designer users that you want to have access to the information. And so in those cases, what we do is we use the report pack functionality to basically share content with them. And so again, this is just a reflection of what we had on the prior screen, but this is the output, PDF document, a nice aesthetic cover page, what the users would have seen had they been looking at this within the browser. So financially oriented elements from a CFO type view, some of the elements as it relates to P&L and otherwise. And then of course, also the ability to incorporate things like narratives, which, gosh, highlighting doesn't make that look particularly good. But what you'll notice is you'll notice some bolded values. That's where you can intersperse within the narrative calculations that dynamically calculate values. So you can really take your financial reporting to an entirely different level. And if your business is spending too often or too much time on your financial close cycles preparing some of these types of documents, or you'd like to be in a position to prepare these types of documents, we are very much the tool set to support that. So lots more that can be discovered here. Happy to kind of drill into more examples, but I did promise very much that I would share building a report, and so what I'll do is I'll do that now. So I'm going to just go ahead and click on analysis table. What that does is that gives me a brand new blank canvas. This is the query. This is basically the placeholders for where I'm going to put things on the rows and the columns and the like. And on the right-hand side, we are not only providing the analytics, but as our name implies, the data as well. So we have an entire definition of how we source the data from the ERP and from your other sources. That model is something that your organization can maintain in terms of the data that comes out of the ERP. A lot of people default to the standard model and then evolve it over time. But know that when we point at the ERP, it's about more than just financial data. So we have our numbers that are all kind of hidden under this measures folder. And then everything else that you see here as I kind of start to highlight are considered to be topics or dimensions. And as I scroll this, what you'll note is there's a lot of topics when we start talking about every facet of the ERP, not just finance, but sales, purchasing, inventory management, all those different other elements coming into play. But so what we tell people to do who go through our training is to go after the numbers they're interested in first. And so we have calculations that are basically driving us, that are in the model around liquidity and around P&L and so on and so forth. I'm going to do something just incredibly basic. I'm just going to grab the actual amount and I'm going to throw it on the columns. Now, in a real environment, that probably should have balanced to zero, but we'll leave that alone for now. But what you'll notice as I collapse measures, the topics list gets dramatically shorter. What we are doing is we know the data from the ERP so well that we know how it relates to each other within the ERP as we extract it. Meaning, if you choose a GL related metric, you're going to get GL related topics to use to analyze by. You choose a sales related metric, the same will be true, the sales related topics. So you don't have to know your data incredibly well, but rather you just have to have the ability to come in and explore and really go down the path of, hey, I'd like to report on things from a chart of accounts. And maybe specifically, I want to look at the profit and loss account items. And so I'll put that onto the rows. And so I'm going to go ahead and kind of double click that. Actually, I'll just do drill down. So we've got kind of a cleaner view here. Now, this is very much a starting point. And that starting point means that we probably want to define some level of filtering and other things that can happen. I'm going to just simply take company. I'm going to drag it up to the slicers. And so what that does is that means that I now can choose from different companies, or the user of this report as a consumer can do the same. Now I can continue to work on this and add other filtering elements across the top. But what I'll do in this particular case to keep this incredibly simple is I'll just expand date. And, and I talked a little bit about the support for multiple fiscal calendars, the support for a regular calendar. You'll notice that we have 4 entries here, date.calendar, with 2 different sets of initials after it, YQMD, year, quarter, month, day, YWD, year, week, day. The person who set this up can define how many different hierarchies they want to support, the supporting for the drilling up, the drilling down. That's very much within the realm of what the user can do. Now, as I expand the YQMD, I have time functions, and I have actually the years and the quarters and the months and the days. And I also have some inbuilt calculations like the last 12 months. So for example, if I drag the last 12 months up to the columns, we're going to automatically have the last 12 months. And it's just that simple to build some of these containers that then can be reused across this report and others for the purposes of reporting. Now I'm going to go ahead and remove this because what I want to do is I want to use one of the time functions, and specifically I'd like for this always to be reflective of, let's do the current quarter. Actually, let me do current year. I think that's probably going to be better. So I'll do current year. I'm going to put that on columns. And so you'll notice this is the current fiscal year. Now, I'm not particularly thrilled with the way that this is stacking up. I know I'm only going to use that single measure, so I'm just going to put it in the background on the filters. But now I can go off and I can, look to pull other things on, or I can right-click current year, drag and drop, and go to time, do parallel period, do period in prior year, and now I've got this year versus last year. If I want to introduce a calculation, it's incredibly simple. I just right-click, choose custom formula, I'll do what I don't always do well in a demo. I'll give it a label, call it difference. Now I just need to build the formula. And if you've built formulas in Excel, this is just the drag and drop kind of equivalent of it. So I'm just doing the prior year. I'm going to subtract the current year from it. I'm going to go ahead and click apply, and then we start to see a difference show up there. And it's really intended to be that straightforward and that easy. Now you'll notice that maybe we want to do something like reversing the sign on the data, some of those sorts of things. Well, we can do that very simply. I can say, let's wrap this up in a custom formula. And in this case, I'm going to just multiply this by a constant value of -1. There we go. And I'm going to go ahead and click on apply. And you'll note I didn't actually give that a label, but that's okay because it's in the background. But it's just that simple to kind of make those very basic type changes. And if I really wanted to just have a revenue focused orientation, well, I can actually drill down on this. Oops, didn't mean to do that, but that's okay. What I'll do is I'll do unwrap. That'll bring us back where we were. And but there's a number of different things that we can do in terms of kind of the exploration. There's also elements that we can introduce in terms of visualization. So if I turn on the chart view, possibly not going to be the best looking thing that we've created. But what I can do, because I turned on chart, I can explore the different types of chart elements. I might change the chart type to something along the lines of a bar marker or something along those lines, or even the more of this type of a view. There's a lot of different elements that we can naturally turn on. In this case, maybe I just want to look at a particular set of data in this chart. If I select this and we'll leave that as is and select this row, and I'll click on select data, and that basically makes it just a revenue focused chart for us. And then as revenue possibly gets expanded by drilling down, I can look at this in different ways. Possibly at this point makes more sense as a pie chart or something along those lines. Well, we can do all of those things. So lots of different things that we can do. What hopefully you're experiencing here is this is a much more dynamic, interactive design experience than maybe you've experienced in the past, where there was a lot of heavy querying of the underlying data before you're able to get results and present information in different ways. The traditional financial decision makers are probably more at home in the tables of information. However, there may be users that you want to reuse some of the financial calculations in the chart forms as well. So I'm going to leave that. I'm going to go back and talk to just one other element on the slides, if I can. And to do that, I just need to switch across, and that is the packaging and pricing of the solution. So those of you that are not familiar with Sage Data and Analytics, it comes at 3 different price points. It is available as a standard package, an advanced package, and a premium package. What the standard package really delivers is a nice entry point for organizations that are very focused on the financial reporting, the things we're talking about today, because the modules for GL, AR, and AP are included within this plan. There is a single designer. There's only 5 consumers, but it is a great starting point. You do, with that designer capability, have the ability to build your own reports, your own analytics. It only supports 2 companies. So if you have more companies, you might look at the advanced plan or even the premium plan. The pricing that you see is the cost of the software and the cost of the hosting for an annual basis. What is not necessarily reflected in this is there is roughly a 40-hour startup to get the implementation done, but everything else is basically included in this annual cost, including access to free self-study training, as well as access to Sage University and some of the courses that are there, which they charge a nominal fee, I think $75 per student for those. If you do happen to want to leverage data from other sources, then you would look to either the annual plan and add that as an add-on, or the premium plan, which comes with some additional sources. we're very pleased that Rackus Bloom has customers on both the advanced and premium plan. The standard plan, there's nothing against that, but it is very much just a starting point. If you do choose to kind of move between plans, that is an option that can occur even mid-year if you like. So with that, I know that we've covered a lot of ground in the last 45 minutes. At this point, Kelly might just see if there's any questions that we need to address that folks might have put forward, and maybe turn it back over to you.
Absolutely. So if anybody does have any questions, there is a Q&A at the bottom of your screen, somewhere on your screen. Just type them into there, and we'll start with the ones that did make it in there. What versions of Sage 100 does this work with?
Yeah, good question. So we're, first off, we support both SQL and ProvideX as data sources. So if you're using ODBC to ProvideX, we've got you covered. If you're using SQL Server, that's equally good. We basically are very conformant with Sage in that we support the most current, and I think the 2 prior releases. Truth be told, we probably have connectivity to others, but officially it's the current and the prior 2.
What is the biggest difference between this and Power BI?
That's a good question. So Power BI probably does more on the visualization side of things comparatively than anything else, but that's all Power BI really does. The intelligent way that we connect to extract the data out of the Sage ERP means that we're delivering a data platform. Also, Power BI is not going to inherently provide that same experience as I was building a report of allowing you to kind of choose the data, the numbers, and have all the related data show up without you knowing the data. With Power BI, you have to be an incredibly smart or knowledgeable user of the database because there's no Power BI provisions for Sage-specific connectivity.
All right, can you add more companies in the advanced price package?
Good question. At this moment, no. That's not, unfortunately, that's not an extra that's available. I think that we would like to always understand, kind of the scenario that people are up against, and certainly, hopefully, there's a compelling case for some of the other premium features that would kind of augment the need to go to that plan.
All right. We have other data in a database. Can Sage Data and Analytics be used for dashboards on this data?
It can. So not only does Sage Data and Analytics support, the Sage ERP, but a full range of additional data sources. And I apologize, we didn't really get into that from a demonstration standpoint, but whether it be a traditional database application like a SQL Server or an Oracle or a MySQL, or even an Access database for that matter that we would get to through ODBC, there's the ability to connect to those databases, the ability to connect to other applications that might be running in your customer's premises, or that might be cloud-based that provide common interfaces like a REST API or an OData interface as well.
Can this be run on our own servers?
Good question. So the product itself is only available in a cloud-based capacity. Candidly, the pricing that you see on the screen here, because of the fact that we do require a SQL Server and things like that, you'd probably be hard-pressed to license the third-party software from Microsoft, provide the server environment, all those sort of things, and buy our software for the price point that we're at here.
How long to implement?
Yep, so the standard implementation generally runs anywhere from 24 to 40 hours, and a lot of that depends on a couple of things. Which plan is selected, because the standard plan, there's just simply less that's getting implemented there. Also, part of it is, as a customer, your participation around the validation, the verification, those sorts of things. The quicker things are validated, the quicker things are verified, the less time that actually has occurred. But we generally see most customers up and running in 40 hours or less, and that is typically spread over the course of 2 to 4 weeks.
All right. Is there a dashboard providing a global view of data per company?
Yeah, there are very much, there's a lot of components that we just naturally didn't get to. And so I'd highly encourage that if they want to see kind of all the dashboards that are available, that maybe they touch base with your team, Kelly, to get access to the ebooks. The ebooks, we have one available for each one of the plan types. Pixel perfect representation of the analytical content, so you can see what's there. The best thing about that is, we may very well deliver for a financial decision maker, a sales decision maker, inventory or purchasing and the like, but you also have very much the ability to pick and choose analytical elements from each of those and assemble your own dashboards. And that can be done incredibly quickly. And it's very easily trained through our Sage U curriculum.
Is there any sort of trial, test, or limited version available?
There is not, and part of the reason is because of the nature of kind of having to set up and do the chart of account mappings and those sorts of things. We're of course happy to support Brackus Bloom in terms of kind of demonstrating elements, back to you as customers as to what the platform can do. We very much also know that there's a strong referenceable base that's growing, around questions you might have about others' experience. We believe that both of those are certainly part of the key tool set for helping people make decisions.
All right. When creating a report, can I pull information from multiple areas like AR and then pull info from inventory module or compare sales order reports to the GL to verify integrity?
Yes, you absolutely can, and it makes people like purchasers do a happy dance, right? Because now they don't have to go pull stuff from a sales ledger into sheet 1, pull stuff from the inventory into sheet 2, pull something from the GL into sheet 3, and then do Excel magic to try and figure out what's going on. You absolutely, because of the nature of the model, it looks across the entirety of the ERP, and so you can quite literally do exactly as the question asked. Pull from those different areas, pull them onto the same report, and where there's common elements, whether it be organizational elements or otherwise that are topics, those can allow you to look across all those different sets of metrics.
All right, that covers all the questions. So we're doing great on time here.
Yeah, for sure. Some fantastic questions. And Kelly, you know how this works, right? So we've done this webinar. We've got all these great people that have turned out. People, have asked a lot of questions, and then they might get to the point where they're like, oh, shoot, I didn't ask about this. And I know that, first of all, Kelly, I know you know where to find me. So, if there are questions that people have after the fact, I know they can put them across, to your team. But we're very much at everybody's disposal if they do have other questions that they need answered.
Absolutely. Do you happen to have a slide with your contact information, Trey?
I do not, but
I will make sure.
Yeah, the easiest way to find kind of more detail about us is you can do the www.sagedataanalytics.com. That will actually take you to kind of some of the more information, as well as, obviously we would love if they reached out to your team, Kelly, and you put them in touch with us.
Perfect. All right. Well, if there's no other questions, I'm going to quickly thank Trey and the team at Zap BI. They made that made this webinar possible. Thank you all, everybody behind the scenes, and of course our attendees. We know your time is valuable, so thank you for spending some of it with us today. And if you would like to learn more, as Trey said, you'll be actually receiving a survey shortly after this webinar ends. Fill that out and a member of the VBCC team will be in touch to assist you. And until next month, everybody have a great afternoon.
Thank you, Kelly. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.